All right, everybody, welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. Today is Thursday, April 23rd, 2026, otherwise known as the date for round one of the 2026 NFL Draft. It's Draft Palooza, everybody. We're going to get right into all of it today, from a regrade of the 2023 draft to our final mock picks to our big wild cards in round one to our favorite sleepers and a whole lot more. Before we get to all that, I'm Nolan Bianchi. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Richard Silva. Richard, how goes it today, my friend? Are you excited? Are you ready?
Yes, I'm very excited. I'm happy that pre-draft season is over and now real draft season is here.
Yeah, I go through waves during the draft season. It's like sometimes I'm like, oh, this is a lot of fun. I like digging into these guys, and then I'm kind of like manic depressive with it a little bit, because then I'll just like hit a wall and I'm like, gosh, I can't wait for this to be over. I'm so sick of all writing about these guys who probably aren't going to end up being Lions. But either way, you and I have been putting out a ton of stuff over at DetroitNews.com. If you're late to the party, if you haven't caught up, there's a million ways for you to catch up outside of this podcast at DetroitNews.com, whether that be position by position previews, whether that be individual prospect profiles that we've been doing throughout the course of the month, to any number of different takes and ways to kind of explore the draft and all the different possibilities that are going to be on the table, not just for the Detroit Lions at 17, but for the Detroit Lions through rounds 1 through 7, as well as the other 31 teams in the NFL. We are going to get to our final mock picks in just a minute, but I did want to start with something that we did earlier in the week, and something that's kind of become a staple of our draft week coverage, and that is a regrade of the draft that happened 3 years prior, which in this case happens to be the 2023 NFL draft. So I think we should start there, get that out of the way, and then we can move on to the present day, because curious to get some of your thoughts on this. I think I was a little high and low, but that was kind of the nature of the draft class. So we'll start with the first 4 picks here, because I gave them all the same grade. Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, and Brian Branch all got an A+. And it should be noted that I'm grading the picks and the players themselves, but also Brad Holmes and the job that he did to make this all come together. And I was a little bit interested to see what the feedback was going to be. I didn't ultimately end up looking at the comment section of the Detroit News, because I didn't want people, I didn't want to see things that hurt my feelings. But generally speaking, you read them and you said that the feedback on those 4 was pretty good.
Yeah, I think most people agreed in the comments where they were just like, yeah, pretty high, pretty low, but that's, like you said, that was the draft. The first 4 picks absolutely home run, crushed out of the park, and then the last 4, I mean, none of those guys are on the team anymore. It is interesting to me because obviously, like, to get this out of the way, like, those top 4 guys are all great. At least those top 2, at least in my opinion, are all pro caliber. We saw it with Jack last year. I think Jahmyr is all pro caliber, even though he hasn't gotten one yet, having to deal with CMC and Bijan in front of him. Regardless, and then the second 2 are maybe like a half step right below. They're Pro Bowl caliber, absolutely. Branch and Laporta, and maybe you can make an argument for Laporta, given that he's like top 5 in every receiving category for a tight end since he entered the league. But with that out of the way, I did want to ask you about, and this is like supremely Monday morning quarterback. Like, if you're gonna discuss every draft pick like this, there's really no point, because you're gonna be able to poke holes in every draft pick ever. But for the first round pick, the Jahmyr Gibbs pick, home run, would do it again. Everyone would. I am curious, knowing what we know now 3 years later, would you rather Jahmyr Gibbs or Christian Gonzalez in your current state?
I don't really have the answer to that. I think, because like I fear that any conversation about Jahmyr Gibbs maybe being the pick there is like, well, you don't understand positional value. But it's like, well, I understand football players, and Jahmyr Gibbs is a great football player. Christian Gonzalez is a great football player too. But I think
they're about
the
equal
impact
in at their positions, in my opinion.
Yes, I think too, like when it comes to the whole value discussion, like I think that's honestly the thing that's probably going to split you. If you are somebody who like is big on positional value and things like that, you're probably going to take Christian Gonzalez. If you're not big on positional value, you're going to take Jahmyr Gibbs. Me personally, me, not a big positional value guy. I'm team draft good players guy. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs is just such a rare case when you discuss this type of thing, because yes, Christian Gonzalez is the type of cornerback that completely changes the game for an opposing offense. But Jahmyr Gibbs is not your like standard good to great running back. Like the way that he is able to like his home run ability alone, I think almost puts him in like a different category. And that's probably not an acceptable thing to do for all the analytically driven people out there. But like I said, I watched him in that Giants game. He was the only reason why they won that game. And I'm sure there are times where Christian Gonzalez has been the only, been a huge contributor to Patriots victories over the years. And you saw what that defense did last year with him being arguably the best player on that team. But I just think the amount of times that I've seen Gibbs like take over a game, whether it be the Giants game where he hit 3 home runs from midfield, or it be the Vikings game in 2024, week 7, they go to Minnesota. Minnesota, I don't believe, had lost yet. Lions only had 1 loss in their record. Lions can't do anything offensively, and then boom, blink of an eye, Jahmyr Gibbs just runs for 45 yards, busts the whole game wide open, and the Lions offense goes on to have a pretty good day from there. So, the Buccaneers get like I could go on and on about Jahmyr Gibbs specifically. So I think I would go Jahmyr Gibbs.
I think, and I'll preface this by saying, and I don't think there's a problem with me saying this, even in like whatever my position as, like I cover the team. Jahmyr Gibbs is my favorite player to watch in the NFL, just for like from an enjoyment standpoint. I think he's with the ball in his hands. Bijan's up there as well. I don't know if there's a more electric player in the NFL when he has the ball. I'm on the edge of my seat every time he catches a screen or takes a handoff, and I see he breaks through the first line of defense, the first level of the defensive line, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, dude, I remember against the Cowboys game last year. I forget the corner, but he just like on back-to-back plays, he like juked a corner out of his shoes and then like stiff armed him out of bounds. He's unbelievable. I think with that said, I do lean Christian Gonzalez a little bit because I understand what you're saying. Like, just draft a good football player. And I agree, which is why I don't want to play this game for every draft pick. But we do know that Christian Gonzalez is also a good football player. So I think that's why I would lean him. Like if you want to, 3 years ago when you're talking about the prospects, you could be more confident in Jahmyr Gibbs. So I understand you picking Jahmyr Gibbs because you're more confident in him being a better player. But 3 years into the future, we know they're both all pro caliber. So I think that's why I would lean Christian Gonzalez just a little bit.
Completely fair. Moving on to Jack Campbell real quick. Just want to run through some of his accolades because he was the latest bloomer of all these guys. After his rookie year, like there were conversations, not necessarily from the media, or at least from my mouth, but fans out there were having discussions that Jack Campbell might be a bust because he didn't play all that well in his first season, particularly in coverage. And you combine that with the low positional value that the Lions got by taking a linebacker at number 18. People were ready to jump down his throat. He's had a great developmental trajectory over over the 2 seasons since last season. First team All Pro. He had 176 tackles with 5 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, 3 forced fumbles, 4 pass breakups, and 9 tackles for loss. And then on top of that, just otherworldly leadership, mentality, all those types of things. Did you have anything else on Campbell before we moved on to Laporta real quick?
No, just that I'm eager to see him because Dan Campbell kind of talked about this at owners' meetings where he thinks some of the exits might like unleash, so to speak, a couple of other guys or like allow them to fully blossom. And the example he brought up was like Anzalone leaving, like even more on Jack Campbell's plate. So I am interested how he handles that.
Totally. Sam Laporta. I think this was an interesting one, and I don't know, maybe this wasn't like a fair way to do this, but I did factor in the fact that, like Holmes went against consensus when he made these picks. And that was kind of a big part of the grade, maybe fair or not, was that he went against consensus and he was right and everybody else was wrong. And that showed up again, not just on day 1, but then early in day 2, where they take the 34th overall pick that they got from trading back in the first round, which they used to go get Gibbs, and they end up taking tight end Sam Laporta out of Iowa. Now, this was the offseason after TJ Hawkinson left. Everybody knew that the Lions needed a tight end. Everybody knew that Michael Mayer was still on the board. He was arguably the most attractive prospect on the board after round 1, and the Lions went with Sam Laporta. People were kind of freaking out about it at the time, but over 3 seasons, Michael Mayer has 788 receiving yards, which is less or fewer than the 889 receiving yards that Laporta put up in his rookie season alone. Laporta has the most receiving yards by a tight end in this class. He has 2,104. and the next closest is Dalton Kincaid, 1,692. So it's by a significant margin. And then among all pass catchers from the 23-3 class, he's tied for second in receiving touchdowns behind Jordan Addison in his seventh in total receiving yards. And that all happens despite missing half the season last year with a back injury. So just again, like I think you can nitpick a little bit, like you mentioned at the top, that is Laporta the best player in the league? Like, would he be the guy who you take if you were just starting over and you could take a tight end? The production and obviously his opportunities would suggest that he's not the top guy, but I do feel like if he had any sort of like you talk about like Brock Bowers or somebody like that, and just the volume that they get by being in that offense, it doesn't have a ton of other weapons or feels a need to feed things through them. I feel like Sam Laporta could easily be the best tight end in the NFL from a pass catching standpoint in any given year.
Well, I mean, even still, he's fifth in receiving yards since entering the NFL from a tight end behind Trey McBride, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts, and he's third in receiving touchdowns behind Mark Andrews and Kittle. He has 20 receiving touchdowns and a little over 2,100 receiving yards. So even it's funny. I think because he was All-Pro second team, correct, as a rookie?
Mm-hmm.
Because he had that year and then was a little bit down in 24, I think like sometimes I don't want to say forget how good he is, but maybe like, oh wow, like imagine what he could produce in an offense that like only fed him. He was on pace for a better year this year than his rookie year when he got hurt.
Yep.
Like he was gonna have, not by much, but he was gonna have like a handful of yards over what he got as a rookie. So assuming the back is fine, yeah, I have no issue with grading Sam Laporta an A+. He's a top 5 tight end to me.
And then Branch at 45. He was the closest to getting an A just because it feels like other, safety nickel hybrids have kind of passed him by since he entered the league. Like he had a rip-roaring start. If you would have asked us this, 6 weeks into the 2023 season, probably say Brian Branch is the best player of all of them. Still very possible that he could end up being the best player. But like I said, like I feel like league-wide, relative to his peers, he might not be at the same level as a guy or as the other three guys that we're talking about. Didn't have an otherworldly season last year. And I know Kirby was hurt. They had a whole bunch of injuries in the secondary, but like, you're kind of the guy, like you're supposed to help that. And then, like I said, the fact that they traded up though, and got him a prospect who was like, really, I think he was like number 14 on the Athletics big board. Like he was up there. And the fact that they were able to go up and get him in a trade with a division rival and get that player at 45, I'd push it over the edge for me, turn it from an A to an A+.
Yeah, I think I would maybe lean A just because, like you said, those top 3 guys. Jack is probably top 3 at his position. Bijan or Gibbs is top 3, I would say, and then Laporta's top 5, and Branch might be like right on the outside looking into that just by a little bit if you lump him in with the safeties. But that's splitting hairs at that point.
And like I said about Sam Laporta, I think the same applies to Brian Branch. In any given year, it wouldn't surprise me if it's like, whoa, Brian Branch is the best safety in the NFL this season.
Right. And we've talked about how I feel about Brian Branch on this podcast before. I think he's incredible.
We all like Brian Branch, buddy. That's one thing you need to know.
Nolan doesn't like safeties.
That's not true. We'll get to that later on in the mock draft. All right. And then we'll run through these last couple grades real quick. There's not much debate about him. Hendon Hooker, quarterback, Tennessee, gave him a D-. I think the only thing keeping that from being an F is like it was still semi-decent process. You draft a quarterback who was a Heisman front runner, might have snuck into the first round, ends up falling to the third round, and has this great upside, the mobility. He's all these things. But I think the fact that it didn't work out is squarely on the Lions because they drafted a player from an offense that is like known for being detrimental to developing NFL talent and getting guys ready to play an NFL system. So it was completely avoidable ultimately. And then they thought they could fix them. They thought maybe the maturity and the experience and all that other stuff would help them, but ultimately was not the case. And when he failed, the reasons why he failed were kind of obvious from when they drafted him.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate what he did not make his third season here. I don't believe, right? He got cut after his third training camp last year, or this past training camp. I think he ended up throwing 9 passes in a Lions uniform, none of them in a game of consequence, or when the game was not a blowout in either direction. So yeah, a pick that just very much did not work out, unfortunately.
Broderick Martin, F, round 3, 96 overall. Of the players drafted in the 2020 or in days 1 and 2 of the 2023 NFL draft, only 3 of them have fewer career appearances than Martin, who had 6, and one of them is Hendon Hooker. He played just 28 snaps as a rookie and 25 snaps in his second season. Just for context, real quick, Jack Campbell played 82 games in 82 snaps in multiple games last season. So there were multiple games last year where Jack Campbell, probably every game, most game that the Lions played, Jack Campbell had more snaps in that one individual game than Broderick Martin had in his entire Lions career. So that one, again, that was a big reach. They traded a bunch of picks to get him. People kind of didn't really understand the pick when it happened, but Holmes kind of had the cachet of just like, we'll see. Hey, you guys just relax. You'll see what happens. And then nothing happened. So Colby Sorsdahl, offensive lineman from William and Mary, round 5, 152 overall. I gave him a D+. He really doesn't look like he's ever going to be a contributor. You know, each passing offseason, he gets pushed further and further down the depth chart. But he did make 3 starts as a rookie in 16 appearances. So it wasn't a complete, they got something from it at the very least. And one of those games was a big primetime game on Monday Night Football going into the bye during the season where they went back to the NFC Championship game. I'm not sure if the gravity of all that, applies to his draft grade, but, he did make an appearance. And then rounding out the class here, we've got Antoine Green, wide receiver at North Carolina, round 7, 219th overall. We gave his grade an incomplete because before his second season, he suffered like kind of a freak head and neck injury that just ended his career essentially from there. And I think if he would have suffered an injury that was like pre-existing throughout the draft process and he's got a bad knee and the Lions took him anyways, and then he had a knee injury that ended his career, I think that would be a different story. And I think maybe I could give a grade in that context, but Antoine Green, didn't do a whole lot in his first season, which was not unexpected. He was a 7th round pick in an offense that was pretty dang good. And then was firmly in the mix to be wide receiver 3 the next season. Unfortunately, his injury happened in the preseason opener, and it was just that was all she wrote for him. So gave him an incomplete. As far as the final draft grade goes, I gave Brad Holmes an A+. I don't necessarily know that that's how it would work if you added all the scores together and then average them out, but NFL draft ain't school. So anytime you can get 4 Pro Bowl and all pro caliber players, I'm going to go ahead and grade that draft an A+. And what I will throw on top of that is there was a website that I was using yesterday to kind of look at some of the value, like where would these guys go in a redraft? And the website that I stumbled on first had the 4 Lions players that we talked about going in the top 14. And if that's not an A+ draft, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Brad say that all 4 of those guys were first round grades on their board, and they ended up getting all of them in the top 45, 47. So yeah, I mean, it was a
generational run,
home run.
All right, let's move on here to our final mock drafts. Richard and I have been doing combined mock drafts throughout the draft process up until this week. We did our solo mock drafts, which we like to do right before the draft starts. Richard, tell us what you had. Tell us what you found. Tell us everything about your final mock draft 5.0 or whatever it is.
I think based on how I talked about Blake Miller last podcast episode, it should become as no surprise that Blake Miller was my pick for the Lions at 17. And, to add further context, Monroe Freeling, Francis Mauigoa, Vega Ione, Spencer Fano, and Mansour Delane were all off the board, in addition to some other guys, obviously, as well. But those guys were the top guys that I was looking at that, hey, if they fall, maybe that is someone that I would be interested in. But it was Miller for me for all the reasons that I said last week. The durability, the consistency, the high floor, the athleticism, which in my opinion provides still a not limited ceiling. Like just because he has a high floor doesn't mean he has a limited ceiling. They're ready to move Penesa to left tackle, so go ahead and do it. And Miller can slide into right. And though he only played right tackle, well, that's not true. He played like 3,700 snaps at right tackle over the past 4 years, and then like 100 at left tackle, filling in for a couple games. I think 2 starts he had at left tackle. He was a left tackle in high school, but then shifted to right tackle. How much is high school experience worth in the NFL? Probably not much. Regardless, I think there's a spot for him at right tackle, and that's who I ended up taking at 17. In terms of, I guess, maybe some stuff I learned was that I think there's an opportunity for guys that are going to be high on the Lions boards to slide into the early teens more than I thought, if that makes sense. Like there's a world where, I don't know, Maui Noah starts falling because of the back stuff, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but maybe 2 or 3 receivers, maybe Carnell Tate, the Arizona State person who is slipping my mind right now, if you could help me out. Jordan Tyson, thank you. Maybe them 2 go, and maybe Mekhi Lemon goes above the Lions at 17, and all of a sudden that pushes a player or 2 that you didn't think was going to be available to 13, say, and then you could trade up with the Rams or maybe the Cowboys at 12 if they don't move up, which we'll talk about also. But I just think that there will be, should the Lions fall in love with the player and want to trade up, I think there is a possibility where that happens.
The thing is, like, when we're doing all these mock drafts, so the latest buzz around the NFL draft is that there's some team, the Dallas Cowboys, trying to sneak into the top 3 to potentially draft Caleb Downs from Ohio State. Now, I think the top 10 would go haywire. There's rumors that Jordan Tyson's going to go to the Giants at 5. There's rumors that the Cowboys are trying to get up to 3. There's a whole bunch of stuff that, honestly, I don't think has been super predicted throughout the draft process that are now suddenly things you have to consider. So you've got those 2 things right there. The Cowboys are trying to trade up. The Giants might take Jordan Tyson. Now we have Francis Maui Noah having some back issues. We have Jordan Tyson, who was the previous big injury question mark, just passing with flying colors. Oh my gosh, this guy's awesome. Had the best workout ever. Could go 5 to the New York Giants.
Did you see the video of his workout of one of the reps he reposted on Instagram
with his ankle flexion?
That one
on the ground,
but also when it was routes on air, so whatever. But he jumped up to catch a pass. I'm not kidding. Not even a little bit kidding. I saw it posted on Twitter first from a random account. I thought it was AI. The way he jumped, I was like, oh, haha. Let me go find the real video. And that was the real video. That's how freakish it looked.
Yeah. So, just those combination of things that I was talking about, that has the chance to turn the top 10 upside down, at which point, that turns the middle of the second round kind of upside down a little bit, because you got guys falling who weren't expected to be there, all sorts of stuff like that. Who were some guys that fell out of your first round that maybe you tried to sneak in there, or just guys who you thought would be there and you just couldn't find a place for them?
I think Avion Terrell and TJ Parker, the Clemson defenders, are probably my first 2 that I'm like, I'm a little bit frustrated I couldn't find a spot for them, particularly Terrell. I tend to like Terrell a lot. Denzel Boston was another one, so I only had 4 of the top 5 receivers going. The 3 we mentioned already, and then Concepcion as well, but I did not have Boston in there. Omar Cooper Jr. was in there as well. I think Caleb Banks, all the defensive tackles, I think people are pretty much, I'm not going to say in agreement, because if a guy goes 29th overall, no one's going to be surprised. But I think, it's the consensus that maybe a defensive tackle might not go in round 1. So I was going to mention Caleb Banks, but maybe not. And then maybe, I guess the other guy is Caleb Lomu. He is the only offensive tackle of that top group for me that did not make it in. He was 7th in my offensive tackle rankings, and he 6 guys went in the first. He did not.
Okay. Interesting.
How about you? Who do you got? Same questions. Who do you got? What'd you learn? Maybe some guys that fell out that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, so I ended up going with Monroe Freeling. He was the guy, I think I texted you back in February, even before the NFL Combine. And I was like, you know what? On February, whatever day it is, I'm saying right now, Monroe Freeling is going to be the pick. He ends up going to the Combine, absolutely crushing things. Comes back, his stock skyrockets. He's being thought of as a top 10 pick. And then, are you checking to see if I said that before or after the Combine?
February 16th.
That was the day I was going to guess. Anyways. And so his stock, obviously, it came up right after that, after the combine. He runs like a 4.9 something at the combine, has a 9.99 relative athletic score. Everybody's all over him. He skyrockets into the top 10. I didn't think I would have him there. Or I didn't think he would be available for the Lions at number 17 as this kind of went along, but his stock has kind of simmered a little bit. That there's a soup joke in there. And I just feel like it's kind of probably possible that he ends up falling to the Lions at 17 just because of I think everybody's kind of coming back around now and going, oh wait, no, we like Spencer Fano more than Monroe Freeling. Like Spencer Fano has more to work with. He is, he's a better football player right now than Monroe Freeling. And that's something that he's always had to overcome throughout this draft process is that idea that right now he might not be the best football player out of any of these guys, from based on what he showed us in this last season. He might be up there, but we don't really know. And so I think just the volatility of his selection was a big one for me. As far as what I learned, I really struggled to actually make the pick because in my heart of hearts, I don't think the Lions are going to draft an offensive tackle in round one. I just don't. And the thing that eventually brought me back around was just this idea, like obviously we all like they wore the sweatshirts last year, the anti-height weight speed stuff right there, which Monroe Freeling is kind of a height weight speed pick, but their picks have been height weight speed
and Isaac Tesla.
So have most of them. So I do think that matters to them. And I just think the upside of his pick, the football character, all of those types of things, I think played into my decision to actually send him there, because I do think that there's a pretty good possibility that they're sitting there at 17 going, Monroe Freeling is the best player available for our football club and will help us win the most games here. And I considered Dylan Thieneman. I considered the Oregon safety. I considered TJ Parker from Clemson. I know you're a little bit down on him, but I think he's got a decently high floor, and I think he's going to be the type of player that the Lions are interested in. And then I can't remember who the other guy that I was thinking about
considering
here. Yeah, I feel like there was one more guy, but either way. Oh wait, let me find it. I can find it here.
If I could add real quick while you do that.
Oh, and I also consider Blake Miller because he was still on my board as well.
There you go. Yeah, would have been the better pick. No, I'm kidding. Monroe Freeling was not available to me in my own mock draft. That from my own brain, I did it to myself. On the height weight speed thing, it's funny because like I do believe them in the sense that like. I think when they wore the shirts or the sweatshirts and they make that point, they're saying like we're not drafting these players only because of height, weight, speed. They're drafting them because of things they saw on film, which totally believe them. Yeah. I think the hang up is a lot of the things that they see on film as like the translatable skills that they can work with are a result of the height, weight, speed. So like, you know what I mean? It muddies the conversation a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, I
think they did a good job of demonstrating the different like with Isaac Tesla in particular, he has the height, weight, speed, but it was the blocking at the Senior Bowl, or at least that's what we've been told, is that it was the blocking at the Senior Bowl that really, really got them excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to go back and look at this guy's tape. So, yes, I agree with you, but that also, that has to do with effort. It has to do with discipline and all those things, but also you're not going to be able to do it down in and down out if you're not, an athletic freak. So, I would agree with you there. Another thing I'm interested to see, and maybe we could save this. We'll save this for our wild card section that we'll get to in just a second. Do you have any other questions about about my mock draft?
No, I don't think so. I was thinking about just adding on Freeling a little bit. He was I had him 6 to the Browns, and the reason that I did is because I think the Browns, it's either receiver or offensive line for them, and we've talked about this off camera and whatnot about. Spencer Fano or Francis Mauigoa might be like better offensive linemen, but I don't know if there's a better tackle, at least like going forward. I don't know if I'm more confident in anybody working at tackle than I am Freeling. So that's why I had Freeling going all the way up there at 6 to them, because they signed Zion Johnson, they brought back Tevin Jenkins, they have Elton Jenkins in the middle. I think the middle's kind of set for them. They traded for Titus Howard. It's that left tackle spot that's currently occupied by DeJuan Jones, who I kind of look at kind of similar like Larry Borum, where like could start if you need him, which wouldn't be a bad thing for a guy like Freeling. But you could also translate that to the Lions, where if Freeling's not ready to go week 1 or week 2 or week 3 or week 4, that's fine. I think you're comfortable making that pick knowing that Borum is on the roster.
Which is exactly what you want going into the draft. Like, for all the crap that Brad Holmes has taken for like making that signing and like, I guess, putting the idea out there that he could start in theory if need be. I think like for some reason that has angered a lot of people, but in reality, they're really just setting themselves up to have a good developmental strategy for an offensive lineman if they do pick one in this round. As far as guys who slid out of the first round for me that I wanted to mention, two guys were Jermod McCoy, Tennessee cornerback. Some news came out with him in the last week, and basically that he's going to need another operation on his knee, which he hurt 18, 19 months ago. To fix a cartilage issue, which is not something that you want to hear for a player who's just getting his NFL career started. And then Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the Toledo safety. I'm not convinced that we're going to see three safeties go in this first round. I think we do this every year. It's kind of like, to me, like the safeties in the first round is kind of like projecting Brad Holmes to pick the player at their most glaring position of need. It's just like, it's not going to happen. I don't know. We can talk about it till the cows come home, but on draft night, is it going to happen? Push comes to shove. I'm not convinced.
Well, I think if one of the safeties are going to fall out, it would be him, in my opinion, just because I think he's more, I don't want to call him a project, but more project E than Downs, and then also than Thieneman as well. Excuse me. I think Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, why he would get drafted high is because of the measurables. He's like 6'3" and pretty freakishly athletic.
Yeah. So, all right, we are going to take a quick break to hear from a word from our sponsor.
For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back, generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service, so you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford, driven by family, built on tradition.
All right, segment 2 here at the Gridiron Gang podcast. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. All weekend long over at the Gridiron Gang podcast, we're going to be pushing out content for you guys on Thursday night, on Friday night, on Saturday night. When you wake up each and every morning from Friday through Sunday, you don't even got to think. Just open up your little podcast player, whether it be Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever it might be, put the show on, and you'll be instantly caught up on everything that you missed either the night before, or you'll be up to date on the latest analysis of the players that the Lions have chosen and players that could be available going into the next round of the NFL draft. So make sure to stay locked in for all of that, both Gridiron Gang Podcast and DetroitNews.com. I want to talk about some draft wildcards because there are quite a few wildcards in this first round. We've discussed some of them, kind of in passing here. One of them being, do the Cowboys trade up to 3? Because, that has a lot of ramifications on round 1 and maybe what the Giants are able to do, what the team picking 4 is able to do. But I'm actually going to expand this question into the wild card because I think there's already like 6 teams who have traded their first round pick in this year's draft. And a lot of those trades have happened recently. I think like at least half of them have happened pretty recently, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about how teams feel about this draft class. And I am kind of curious to see how many draft day trades are swung, because I feel like this might be one of the trade happy drafts that we've seen in some time.
Well, I think the consensus is that teams are more willing, especially high up in the draft, are more willing to trade down, and they're kind of like seeking partners or whatever to do it. It is, I guess it just comes down to if there is a player that slides and how many, because all it takes is one GM, right? That is in love with, let's say, Sonny Styles falls past the Giants or the Cowboys don't trade up, and nobody gets Sonny Styles until, let's say, the Commanders are his floor at 7. If there's a team in the low teens that really likes him, that'll move up and jump the Commanders, because I do think that might be his floor, and jump the Commanders and trade up to 6 to come get him. Or that's just one example. Downs is another one where if the Giants go in another direction at 5, that maybe someone could come get him, like the Cowboys. So I think it'll be interesting to see which teams target, or which players are targeted by teams.
And it's an particularly interesting draft for Brad Holmes because I feel like he'd be inclined to move up pretty much whenever possible. I have a feeling that in the first, definitely, but even throughout the draft, the only problem is he doesn't have that third round pick, which it's just kind of like an awkward pick to be missing. Like you'd obviously rather be missing a third round pick than a second round pick, but it's just something about the gap in like a second round pick. That's pretty valuable. A fourth round pick, that is nothing. In terms of like the trade value that happens at the draft. So super, super weird in that regard. Like, what are you going to be able to like? What are teams going to even be looking for? Is the cost of a trade up going to be cheaper than ever? I think that's a possibility. So a lot of different outcomes with this draft, especially within the context of trades. And I would expect it, despite the fact that the Lions are missing a third round pick. They got a ton of day 3 picks. Not sure that's going to be able to do anything for them in round 1 of the draft, but would not be surprised at all for this to be another trade happy draft for general manager Brad Holmes.
I was going to mention as well on the topic of trades, because we were going to talk about in our mock drafts, if we allowed trades, what would have been different. And I ended up putting Ty Simpson to the Steelers in the early 20s. And if you ask me right now what hat Ty Simpson's wearing at the end of Thursday night, I think it'll be a Cardinals hat, because I mean,
same.
Same, yes. I just think that makes sense. However, without allowing trades in our mock drafts, I wasn't going to take him at 3. So there really was not another avenue for the Cardinals to get it. The Cardinals really are the team, because I forget where I saw it, but somebody put like different trade package proposals on the table, and it was like, if you were the Cardinals, which one would you prefer? The Cowboys for 12 and 20 was one, and maybe they wouldn't even get 20; it'd be 12 and something else. But I think the Cowboys are a team that could trade down with them. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other teams that maybe could come up. The Dolphins maybe, because they have a ton of picks, but it's early in that new regime, so maybe they're just trying to load up with talent and just get it where you can. But yeah, Ty Simpson's a guy that I think could swing a trade, or his presence will swing a trade for somebody.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't necessarily know. Like, if you're the Cardinals, like, if I were taking over a rebuild and we just traded our quarterback, it's never good to like start off on the wrong foot and without a quarterback, but the first year is kind of free. I wouldn't be stressing too much about getting that guy in. But on the other hand, you can have a season like the Jets had where you get Justin really Fields and be like, yeah, this will be fine. And then at the end of the year, you have to fire 18 assistants. So, it could go either way. I could see the argument for just getting that whole thing started, especially obviously if they like him. Like, this is that. Mm-hmm. That is implied here. We're not saying that they're going to take a quarterback they don't like just to get a quarterback. But all right, next up here, I got Caden Proctor. Where does he go in round 1? He feels like arguably the biggest wild card of the entire first round. There are some people out there who believe that he's a top 5 talent. What was the quote from Dane Brugler about his workout, his pro day at Alabama?
Let me see if I can find it real quick, because I texted it to you. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. But he's just got so many, like, he's massive, but some kind of not in a good way. He's inconsistent with his pass protection. Like, he's got a lot of warts, and the whole transfer stuff that we talked about previously, back and forth from from Alabama to Iowa, back to Alabama. I don't know. I'm definitely not buying that he's in on the Lions. I want to. That's my one draft prediction. Caden Proctor will not be a Lion.
It'll be interesting, because if he goes before 17, we'll never know. And then, if he's on the board at 17, we will get our answer. The quote that you were alluding to was, I was listening to Dane Brugler on the Athletic podcast, and he said that as he was leaving Alabama's pro day, a scout told him, this is Brugler talking, that a scout told him that was the best workout he'd ever seen for an offensive lineman. And then, quote, if we felt better about the person and the consistency, like that he was going to reach his full potential, he would be a top 5 lock in the draft.
Yeah.
According to Dan, so from a scout.
That's what you're weighing with him. I ultimately had him going 21 to the Steelers in my mock draft. I just not buying it with him. Chargers. But yeah, so that'll be another big wild card, because again, especially with the Maui Noah stuff, which we're going to talk about next, like, could he be the first offensive tackle taken? wouldn't put it past him. So that's another thing I want to get to. The Miami guys, 2 guys, Ruben Bain, edge rusher, Francis Mauigoa, offensive tackle, 2 guys who I think, especially early on in the process, were like, okay, these guys will probably go top 10, maybe top 5. But I think throughout for most of the draft process, even as Bain's stock has kind of slipped after, they measured his arms at the combine and they were unprecedentedly short, he still is like hanging out in that like 8 to 10 region. So I think that's a big wild card. Does Ruben Bain go in that range? Does he slip all the way to the Lions? Like, I can easily see a world where the Lions don't even have to trade up for him. He just falls in their lap at 17. Would they take him? I don't know. I feel like they prefer a little bit better length from that edge 2 guy opposite of Hutchinson and Bain. That's obviously his biggest flaw. And then Francis Mauigoa. There was some reporting that he has a back situation. The reporting on it was very funny, and I texted Rich about that. But Tom Pelissero was on NFL Network, and he's like, "Yeah, Francis Mauigoa has a very non-concerning back problem. Long term, it's a big concern, and could hamper his career. But short term, it's not a concern. So it's not concerning at all to anybody, except for in the long term, which it could be a concern. And I feel like we just don't have a lot of clarity on this back situation right now, and I feel like that could force him to fall. Even and that's adding on to the fact that I think he could have fallen anyways just because of his arm length and his, questionable ability to be a tackle at the NFL level. I think he had a lot of kind of question marks coming in, and that just amplifies him a little bit. And so I'm super intrigued to see where he's going to go. Could he fall all the way to the Lions at number 17? Might be a bit rich, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Albert Breer of SI said, talking about Mauigoa, he described it. So as far as I understand it, the combine happens, and then you could have a combine recheck. Like if there's like an issue that teams want to look at a further player, they can request it. They did with Mauigoa, and he had this back issue. It bothered him last season. Didn't cause him to miss games, but it was bothering him. And then they looked at it, and Breer described it as he could eventually, potentially one day, need a cleanup procedure. Which, what does that mean? For example, like Sam Laporta's back. We talk about it because it's a back, and it's that's a significant body part to have surgery on, but it's a slip disc. It's not that uncommon. I don't know what the cleanup procedure is. Is it for a slip disc? I don't really know. And I do think the heavier, not just an athlete, anybody is. I think that the heavier, the taller, the longer you are, back injuries are scarier. Same thing with feet, right? Like basketball players and foot injuries. It's not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guys getting bended up, and then guys are flying into the back of them while they're trying to anchor, and then it's just that's not good news. Okay, moving on here. We are not going to rank the edge rushers like we did last week with the offensive tackles. If you're interested in hearing our offensive tackle rankings, go back to last week's episode and check that out. But if you had to pick an edge rusher for the Lions at 17 without moving, and we'll even allow guys like Bain, or if you want to somehow project that Bailey falls or something like that, maybe we'll keep Bain out of the equation.
I was going to say, I think Bain would be my pick if he was going to be
here. Yeah.
I think maybe
let's take Reese, Bailey, and Bain out of the equation because those guys are all projected to go top 10.
Right. Because I do think maybe Bain could fall into trade territory. I don't know about 17 territory, but like you said, if we're sticking and picking at 17, my guy would be Akeem Mesidor, and I know that's not going to be popular with you, but I think he plays as so him, Parker, and Falk all play like how they want the line, how the Lions want their DE2s to play, right? Like crush the can, be strong, hold, contain, yada yada yada. I just think Mesidor also couples that, maybe this is just because he's older, and probably is, with the most refined pass rush skill set of those 3 guys. Definitely more than Falk, and I think more than Parker as well. So that's why he would be my pick. But basically between the 3 of them is who it's down to for me.
I'm right there with you. I don't really see, there's a couple guys who specialize as pass rushers, Cassius Howell being one of them. I just don't really see them doing that. And so, like you said, I think that does kind of limit them to TJ Parker, Keldrick Falk, or Akeem Mesidor. My feelings about Akeem Mesidor are somewhat well known on this podcast. I don't love the idea of taking a 25-year-old edge rusher at 17 in the second round. Maybe it's a completely different story, but I don't love it. As far as what you said about TJ Parker and Keldrick Falk, I completely agree. Both NFL ready prospects, like guys who contribute against the run, probably from jump. And the pass rushing stuff, I agree with you that, it is a concern and it probably is a little bit behind Messidor. But if you would have asked us this a year ago, based on the tape that they had just put out, how different is that conversation? Because TJ Parker and Keldrick Falk both had excellent pass rushing seasons in 2024. Given the fact that, and honestly, like, I don't want to say I have regrets or anything, but like if TJ Parker and Keldrick Falk, like just the character stuff, that they both can set an edge, they both can play immediately. The pass rush, stuff is there. I can see the Lions loving them, and it would not surprise me at all to fall out of those rounds. And I can see them being picks where, they cause a lot of like uproar at the time, but like that you solve the edge issue. And you do have pass rushing upside, and they're going to play how you want to play. It's not going to be like a James Houston situation where it's like, oh my gosh, this guy is amazing, but we can't ever play him because he doesn't listen to us and he doesn't know how to stop the run or do any of the things that we want him to do. So I think those guys would both make excellent picks. Messidor too, but I'm just a little less enthralled with the upside and what the Lions are going to be able to get out of him going forward.
Yeah, no, Falk is interesting because I actually saw somebody post on Twitter. They said doing a mock draft, but I make every fan base mad. And yeah. I think the first overall pick was Ty Simpson, and then 2 through 31 were Keldrick Falk. And it's funny because nobody wants to take that gamble, especially after what we saw with Shamar Stewart last year, where trait C pass rusher didn't have a lot of production. I think maybe a difference could be there's less. Not that there was questions about Stewart's like football character or anything like that. I just think that it is a definitive plus for Falk. Like, yes, where everyone says like this guy's like a home, like you don't have to worry about him like doing the right thing. Like he's Mr. Motivated. He you know what I mean? He does it himself.
I had him going 12 to the Cowboys, which might be a bit high, but like they literally traded Micah Parsons because they didn't like how he defended the run. And I would not put it past Jerry Jones to be like, well, it's like I told you guys, we got to defend the run.
I think they traded Micah Parsons because Jerry doesn't like his agent.
I think that's but the explanation. And then they got Kenny Clark and they were like, we wanted to stop the run. See, there's proof that we're trying to improve the run defense.
Right.
All right. Couple sleepers that you like to go round one. Could have hit on this in the mock draft, but wanted to save this for later. I've got Malachi Lawrence, who I'll be honest, this one goes to this is an assist from Colton Pouncey from The Athletic. We saw him recently and he was talking about this guy. He wasn't really like on my radar until like a week or two ago. As far as a guy who could potentially go round one. And then I started watching him and then I started listening to some like draft preview podcasts. And I think I heard Daniel Jeremiah, Lance Zierlein, and Dane Brugler all say in the last week that they think Malachi Lawrence is going to go round one. I think so. Initially, when I do like my board, or not my board, but when I initially like take stock of basically all the draftable players in the class, I write whatever consensus mock they are at the time. And that's usually like in January or February. And so back then, Malachi Lawrence was like ranked 80th overall or something like that. And he's still not like definitively in the first round, but I think he's in the late 30s on the consensus board. Like there seems to be a pretty good groundswell of momentum for him heading towards the draft. I could easily see him going round one. He's also a little bit of an older prospect, but might be a little bit more complete than some of these younger edge rushers that we're talking about, where it's like, they can do this, but they can't do this. So I got him, and then I have D'Angelo Pons. I have no reason to like actually think that he's going to go round one. I just really like him, the cornerback from Indiana, type of guy who like he can play pretty much any way you want to play. He's only 5'8", which is obviously not ideal, but he doesn't play like, I'll tell you that much.
A couple of the guys that I had was Chase Basantis, the guard out of Texas A&M. And it's actually funny. I had 3 guys listed for this category. I only had one of them going in my own mock draft. Mm-hmm. But I think I think it's possible, basically, that these guys are on, the 5-person shortlist right after. Chase Basantis, I think he plays anger. I think there's a couple guards that are like late first, early day 2 guards. Him and Keelan Rutledge from Georgia Tech, who is probably not viewed as highly as Basantis is. But I think both of those guys are a little bit like, Tate Ratledge, Christian Mahogany, mean, spirited players on the football field, which is good for your guard, right? That's what you want. Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker, also from Texas Tech, Basantis from A&M, Rodriguez from Tech. All the production you could possibly want. Was a fifth in Heisman voting. It checks seemingly checks the football character boxes. And I think sometimes when you see a guy that was so productive in college, it's like, well, why isn't he projected to go top 10? Oh, the athleticism's not, really there. I think Jacob Rodriguez tested out pretty well and was a pretty good athlete. How well that translates or could translate onto an NFL field is obviously up to GMs and whatnot to project, but I think Rodriguez could very well go first round. And then Chris Johnson, the San Diego State cornerback, I like him a lot. I mean, I talked about on the on a recent podcast episode, it was either the last one or 2 times ago, and about how it's funny when guys have passer ratings allowed that are lower than when a quarterback would just throw it into the dirt every time. Chris Johnson last year is one of those guys. He had an allowed passer rating of 16.1 to lead the country, all of FBS among corners who played at least 150 snaps in coverage last year. If you lower, there was a corner with like 130, I believe, if I could pull him up right now. LaDainian Fields from Oklahoma State. He only had 130 coverage snaps. He only allowed 2 receptions all year, so he was obviously really good. But Chris Johnson had the volume and had the play style, or had the volume and had the success that you would want from a player when they play in a non-Power 4 conference, which you talked about before. Like, you have to dominate if you come from one of those leagues, and Chris Johnson did.
Yeah, I probably should have included him in my sleepers to go round 1, but because I did have him actually going 30th overall to the Miami Dolphins in my mock draft. But yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. I think we already touched on sleepers to fall out. Like we touched on that. I think it's going to be Emmanuel McNeil-Warren and Jamal McCoy. You had TJ Parker and Avion Terrell from Clemson. First rounder who goes higher than expected. Our last category here. I'm going to go Keldrick Falk. I don't think the pass rushing is super sexy, and I think that's kind of kept him down boards, or at least mock drafts and stuff like that. But I think when push comes to shove, I think people will look at his youth. I think people will look at that 2024 pass rushing season. I think people will look what he's done against the run pretty much his entire career. And then again, as you mentioned, the plus character stuff I think is big.
And a lot of those same things can be said about Monroe Freeling, who is my pick for this section in terms of the upside. I think maybe there are less concerns with, I think Freeling pound for pound might have put better tape on the field for his position last year than Falk did. Or at least I should say there wasn't a glaring hole in Freeling's game like there was with Falk in the pass rush stuff. But yeah, I mean, for the upside reasons that you described for Falk is how I feel about Freeling.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is our 2026 draft preview. We're going to play a game. Don't go anywhere. All right. Don't go anywhere. But just want to thank you all for following along throughout this process. This is a grinded out time of year. We're not leaving the house much. Not even in the sense of like we got to stay at home to work so much, but just like we're not going out. We're just for work. We're just like working from home a lot, and it's just it's a daily grind. And so to everybody who has checked out our draft coverage, made it worthwhile, we really do appreciate it. And like I said, we will have you covered wire to wire from the start of the draft through the end of the entire weekend. Do not go anywhere from Gridiron Gang or DetroitNews.com. What's this game that we're playing? What's the name of it?
It doesn't have a name yet. We're still trying to figure it out. It's the game. It's the name 10-person game, and then there's a category, but you only get one guess per person game.
Okay, so basically, I have 10 people who share a commonality, and I'm going to start listing them one by one. Rich gets one guess each time on the commonality that connects all of them, and I'm going to see if I can get all the way to 10. So let's get it started.
And Nolan got it on the second time last week. So Nolan has 9 points currently.
And I was very, 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 very close to getting it on the first try, but I was the victim of specificity. So I didn't get it. Your first name, Miami Edge defender, Ruben Bain.
And you said this is
draft edition.
Draft related. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to say the category is draft related. This
okay.
is draft edition of the game.
Got you. Was an All-American at some point.
No. Your next person Texas Tech edge, David Bailey.
Texas Tech edge, David Bailey. Scored a defensive touchdown in college.
No. Up next, we have Clemson cornerback, Avion Terrell.
Terrell only played at Clemson, so it's not like anything with transfers or playing with multiple schools or anything like that. So did Bain, only at Miami. I'm going to say all of these guys were multi-sport athletes in high school.
Potentially, but that's not the category.
Okay.
Up next, Oregon tight end, Kenyon Sadiq.
All right, so we got defensive players and a receiving tight end now. All of these guys were Bain was a 5-star coming out, I'm pretty sure, of high school because he almost went to Auburn when I was covering them. They were all top 100 prospects.
Give me a second. No, that's not the category.
Was I close though?
Directionally correct.
Who
Up next, Georgia offensive tackle Monroe Freeling.
All right. I mean, surely I don't think Kenyon Sadiq was a 5-star. Let me check real quick. Because Bain, I'm pretty sure, was a 5-star. I think Freeling was a 5-star. Sadiq was a 4-star, but I said top 100 recruit already, and that was directionally in the ballpark. All won state titles in high school.
No. Up next, we have Utah offensive tackle Caleb Lomu.
Caleb Lomu has started 2+ seasons in college.
No, you were a lot closer earlier. We have up next. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow, we're getting close. You get nervous. Georgia tight end Oscar Delp.
All right, so we have our first non-potential first rounder. Probably something to do with recruiting, given what you just said. I don't know. And immediately in my brain, I was like, I don't know, didn't flip their commitment at any point, but that's probably way too in the weeds for this. Went to college in the state they're from?
Nope. You're really, really close before.
With what, the top 100 thing?
You're really, really close before. You've said a lot of things that are. Your hand was hovering over the button, but it didn't quite touch the button. Notre Dame tight end Eli Raridan.
Was I close with the top 100 recruits thing? Should I keep going down the recruiting path?
Yeah, it's not a bad place to go.
Okay, let's see, because I feel like Eli Raridan will be a significant hint trying to find this out. Were they top 10 prospects in their state?
That is not the category. Up next, number 9, we have Michigan defensive end Derek Moore.
1, 2, 4. Only got one more name after this. Trying to think what possibly recruiting could Derek Moore and Eli Raridan have in common.
What I'll say is that you had misinformation on 2 of these guys. That is preventing you from.
Were they all just 4-stars?
Yeah, they were all 4-star recruits. Dang it! I was so close.
I thought
all the way to 10.
For some reason, I thought Ruben Bain was a 5-star, but yeah, you're right. 4-star.
No.
He was the number 64 recruit in the class of 2023.
When you said that Ruben Bain was a 5-star, I was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna get him all the way to the end." Then you said Monroe Freeling was a 5-star, and then I was like, I didn't know if I was gonna give it away because you said that, and then I immediately started Googling because I was like, "Oh man, did I mess this up?" Nope, both 4-stars.
For some reason, I thought he was. Freeling was, I think, super close. Yeah, Freeling was right on the border, but
yeah. Well, and I intentionally chose first outside of Terrell. I intentionally chose first round prospects who I did the prospect profiles for because I knew you weren't gonna like. There was a lesser chance of you being on the 24/7 sports profile at any given time. So, pump 2, I win. All right. Thanks everybody for listening to today's episode of Gridiron Gang Podcast. We will see you back here tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Thanks for listening.